So welcome to this section where we're going to be modifying the response. So for now we're just returning a plain string, but let's change that. Let's change it to, let's return an actual JSON response back. So in order to do that, we're going to have to first define our JSON model. And in this case, in Spring Boot, we can do that by just creating a Java class. So for the purposes of this here, what I'm going to create is I'm just going to create another package here that I'm going to name, in this case, let's say resource. That's going to have the response and request resources. And I'm just going to say, let's just name it test response for now. Test response. And this is going to be a Java class that's going to have, for our purposes, only two fields. So it's going to have a private string name and another parameter, private string last name. Now we would have to add the constructors and the getters and setters, and you can do that in IntelliJ. If you right click in the class, you can click on the generate, and you can add first, let's say, all args constructor. Then we can go to generate, and we can add like no args constructor, the default one. We can generate and we can add getters and setters, and I'm just selecting all the fields here, and it's going to create getters and setters for all of the fields. Now after we've done the class like this, we can use that. So what we can do right now, I could go in the test controller, and instead of returning the plain string over here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and I'm going to say that I'm going to be returning a test response. So I'm just going to click that I'm going to be returning a test response. And now obviously this is not going to be correct anymore. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to say test response equals new test response. And what's happening, basically, I'm just instantiating an object of this class right over here. So it's just a plain class, plain Java class, that just has two fields, two string fields, name and last name, a constructor. It has the getters and setters. And in the controller, basically, I'm just instantiating an object of that class, and I'm just going to set the name to the name that we received from the query parameter. So I'm just going to say, okay, that's going to be the name. And I'm going to do the same thing for the last name. So I'm just going to say set last name, and this is going to be the last name right over there. And now what we're going to do is now we're going to be, instead of returning this string here, we're still going to keep the 200 OK status, so the response entity are OK, but I will just return the test response back. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to restart the application. And after I restart the application, I'm going to go in the browser again. So after it restarts right now, I'll go in the browser. And now when I click enter on this route, we should no longer get this plain string, but we should get an actual JSON back. And that's exactly what's happening. So I just clicked enter, and as you can see, if I go into raw data, we're actually getting JSON back. And we have the keys here. So it's the name key that comes from the name of the field in the test response class. So that comes right from this name over here. And that's for the name, and that's for the last name. So basically those are the keys are coming from there. Now, if for some reason you want a different name, there's an annotation for that. So if you want the key in the JSON to be different than what's in the Java class, so for example, if you don't want it to be name, if you want it to be something else, you can do that using the JSON property annotation. And here you can specify your, let's say, different name, for example. Let's say name JSON in this case, or something else, like if you want to specify it differently. Now, if I restart this, and if I hit the endpoint again, you're going to see that this is going to be called differently. It's going to be picking up the JSON key from here. So if I click enter right now, as you can see, the name is no longer just name, but it actually has name underscore JSON. So that's how you would modify the keys in the JSON. But for now, we're going to remove that. But that's just so you can keep in mind, that's how you can modify your keys in the JSON. I'll remove that for now, and I'll just take out all the imports. So on Windows, in order to remove all the imports, I just did Control-Alt-O, and that just removes all the imports. I'm going to restart the application, and we're going to go back to the default name here. And yeah, let's go back to the browser. So as you can see, I'm gonna wait for the application to start. It got back to the name again, to the last name. So yeah, and if I were to change these values here, so they're obviously getting changed and they're getting adjusted in the JSON here. But that's how do we return JSON. So we basically create a Java class that then gets turned into JSON by Spring. So we basically return it as a response entity, and that will get mapped to JSON and will get returned as a JSON. So that's going to be it for this section of the tutorial.